Hello, everyone. Welcome to the launch event for Extreme Imagination, which I am just going to show you because I am so proud of it. My book published today. Just in case anyone watching thought this was just an ebook or something, no, this is an actual physical book out today. I'm so proud of myself. So I'm just going to see if I can share my screen, and I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about my journey through maladaptive daydreaming and also about what you can expect to learn if you buy the book. So let's hope, after all our technical problems, that the screen sharing works. Let's see if I can do that. Right. Okay. So here we are. Now I've lost the chat window. Does anyone, let me just make sure I'm not in the other. No, I'm not still. Right. We're good. I can see the chat window again. Great. So let's get started. So I'm Carla Borchards. This is the launch event for my book, Extreme Imagination. So I'm just going to start off by a quick introduction to me and to my involvement with maladaptive daydreaming. And that has not clicked through to the next. Sorry, I'm just going to have to try and share the screen again because that did not go the way I was planning on it going. Here we go. Let's see if it works this time. There we go. Right. We're right now. This is not going well, is it? Okay. So who am I? I'm Carla Borchards. I'm the author of Extreme Imagination, which I just showed you. I'm also the author of The Daydream Place, which, as far as I know, is probably the most prolific blog devoted to immersive and maladaptive daydreaming anywhere on the internet. I'm putting up a new blog post every week. It's been going for about 4 years now, so there's a lot of content on there. If you haven't looked at it, do go and check it out. There's a massive amount of information there. I'm also on Reddit. I was hoping a few people were going to come over from Reddit, but I can see we still don't have many people on this call, so maybe not. But if you are watching this later and you found this through the Reddit group, you know me on Reddit as Diamond Burnshot. I'm one of the moderators of the Maladaptive Dreaming subreddit. I also help Professor Ellie Sommer with some of the editing of the ICMDR newsletter. That's the International Consortium for Maladaptive Daydreaming Research. So that's the organisation that brings together all of the researchers around the world who are investigating maladaptive daydreaming. And I am also one of the editors of Dreamweaver Narratives, which is the magazine of the ISMD, the International Society for Maladaptive Daydreaming. The ISMD launched at the beginning of this year, Dreamweaver Narratives. We're hoping to put the first issue out in November. So do look out for that if you're an ISMD member. You're going to love it. It is going to be a huge benefit of your membership. And I'm also a lifelong daydreamer. I first remember daydreaming when I was about 4 years old. I can remember wandering around the garden, imagining that I was a princess in a fairy castle or something. And at 4 years old, you'd probably say that was relatively normal, imaginative play for a child of that age, but I never stopped. And I have always had stories in my head, like plots and characters and so on. And for years, I thought it was just me. I didn't have a name for it. And eventually, it was 2018, I think. I was 46 years old. It was a Saturday morning. I was halfway through getting dressed, and I suddenly had this random thought, I really should Google this and see if anyone else has stories in their head all the time. That was just, I didn't have a word for it. So that was just how I described it to myself. And I've got no impulse control. So 5 minutes later, I'm sat in front of my computer. I'm still half dressed and I'm reading about maladaptive daydreaming. And it was just a revelation to me. It was like, wow, there's a word for this. It's not just me. I'm not alone. And that sent me off down a very deep rabbit hole that I've never really climbed out of, to be honest. And one of the things that, because I've become quite active in maladaptive daydreaming groups on social media and so on, I think that the majority of people around the world who are living with the symptoms of maladaptive daydreaming still don't know there's a word for it, and they still think it's just them. And I mean, we see this in the Reddit group. It'll be like almost every week someone pops up saying, oh my God, it's not just me. And when people find out that there's a word for this thing that they've been doing all their life, most people, their first reaction is the same as it was for me. It just relief that you're not alone. But then for the people who are really struggling with maladaptive daydreaming and are finding it's really affecting their ability to function in the real world, then the next thing they want to know is, well, how do I fix it? And I started to realize that there was a need to just bring everything that I've learned about maladaptive daydreaming together in one place, and to actually give people a resource that will help them understand how their daydreaming got out of control and what they can do about it. And that was basically the inspiration to writing Extreme Imagination. I just felt there was a need for a book to help people understand what they're experiencing. So before we get into talking about maladaptive daydreaming, I just need to start with a few definitions, because there are so many different definitions and misconceptions and so on about maladaptive daydreaming that are floating around online. So I just want to try and explain how I use those terms in this presentation and in the book. So to start off with, before we ever get to the daydreaming, we have to start talking about the difference between daydreaming and mind wandering. Because for most people who don't daydream the way we do, who don't have that mental movie going on in their mind the whole time, those people tend to use the words daydreaming and mind wandering to mean the same thing. And so if you've ever tried to explain your daydreaming to somebody and they've said to you, but everybody daydreams, what they probably mean is everybody mind wanders. Because mind wandering, basically, that's just any thoughts that you have that are not related to whatever you're doing in that moment. So that's when you're driving home from work and you're thinking about what to have for dinner, or when you're getting ready for bed and you're thinking about what your boss said in the meeting that morning. It's those kind of thoughts. And mind wandering, it tends to be quite random. You don't, so getting my slides in the muddle here. Yeah, so mind wandering is the thoughts that are not connected to what you're doing in that moment. And they tend to be quite random, quite undirected. When you're mind wandering, you don't choose what you're going to think about. The thoughts, you're not focused on anything in particular, and the thoughts just pop up, and they tend to be quite fleeting. You might think about something for a minute or two, and then that sparks another idea and you go off to thinking about something else. And if you get interrupted when you're mind wandering, and if someone says to you, oh, what were you thinking about there? You might just have to pause and think, yeah, what was I thinking about? Because you weren't really paying attention to it. And certainly you don't feel the need to go back to it. If you get interrupted when you're mind wandering, that train of thought has just gone. You don't come back to it again and again and again. Now, if you're an immersive daydreamer, you know that what goes on in your head it's almost like the complete opposite of mind wandering. We have these complex stories in our heads. When I was doing some of the research for Extreme Imagination, I actually looked up the dictionary definition of daydreaming. And the dictionary said that daydreaming is indulging in idle fantasy. And I thought, not for me. It's not idle, and that makes it sound like it's trivial, it's not that important. That's just not what it is. Immersive daydreaming, this thing that comes really naturally to some people, this thing that I have had going on in my head for as long as I can remember, it's more like a mental movie. There's a plot, there are characters, there's a story that evolves over time, and it's very focused. It's not the random drifting from topic to topic that you get with mind wandering. In immersive daydreaming, you're right into that scene. People can spend an hour or more just on perfecting that one scene. And if you get interrupted, particularly if it's at a crucial point, like when your main character's just about to have their awesome victory or something, you want to go back to it. And people do. You go back to the same point again and again and again, or you pick up the story where you last left it. And that means that over time, your mental movie can develop into this really complex, intricate story that spans huge amounts of time. And immersive daydreamers can spend months or even years just developing one story because it can get so detailed and so complex. And immersive daydreaming, it's a natural thinking style. I don't know how that has come up on the screen. It does say that's not necessarily harmful. I don't know. On my screen, the harmful's been cut off. I don't know if the rest of you can see it. So immersive, what we've been talking about so far, the having a story in your head, having these characters and the plot and so on, that's just, for some people, I think that's just a natural thinking style. I have thought in stories for as long as I can remember. That's immersive daydreaming itself. Immersive daydreaming is not necessarily harmful. It's just the way you think. But immersive daydreaming can get out of control. And that's what maladaptive daydreaming is. So maladaptive daydreaming is immersive daydreaming that has taken over to the point that it's now harming you. It's now making it very difficult to function in the real world. It usually starts because people start to use their immersive daydreaming as a way to escape from reality. So in that sense, it's not that different to when people zone out in front of Netflix, or they doom scroll on social media, or they play video games for hours on end. It's the way some people just numb out and get away from the stresses and strains of everyday life for a while. And done occasionally when you've had a really stressful day, again, not really a big deal. But the trouble is, immersive daydreaming is so vivid and so compelling, and we have very, very genuine emotional connections to our fictional characters. It's very easy for it to get out of control and for it to become the thing that you do every time that reality is feeling a little bit stressful or a little bit just even not the way you want it. So over time, this immersive daydreaming can become excessive and even addictive. I know addiction's quite a strong word, but I do think that maladaptive daydreaming can be classified as a behavioural addiction. It can affect people's work. It can make it very difficult to focus on your work, or if you're a student, it can make it very difficult to study because you can't focus in reality for so long because you're always being pulled away by this urge to go and see what's happening next in your imaginary world. It can affect you socially because you can find that you're turning down opportunities to go out and meet people in real life because you'd rather hang out with the imaginary people in your head. And it can even affect people's self-care. One example is it can make it very difficult to have a healthy sleep routine because you're always wanting to just stay up just a little bit longer. I'm just going to finish this scene. Well, if you've ever said that you're going to stop daydreaming at the end of that scene, you'll know that doesn't really work. So it can affect every aspect of your life. So maladaptive daydreaming, again, it's cut off, hasn't it? That says maladaptive daydreaming. It's about the effects and not about the content. So having stories in your head is not automatically maladaptive daydreaming. Having fictional characters that are so real to you that you feel like you genuinely care about them, that's not automatically maladaptive daydreaming. It's only maladaptive daydreaming if it's taken over to the point where you're now finding that it's causing problems in other areas of your life. Okay, so hopefully we've got through the definitions. We understand that immersive and maladaptive daydreaming, it's not just mind wandering. It's not what most people think about as daydreaming. And we understand the difference between immersive daydreaming, that's the stories in your head, that's not by itself a problem, and then maladaptive daydreaming, which is where it's actually harming you. So now let's move on to the other bit of definition I want to hear about, which is what does it mean to overcome maladaptive daydreaming? The first thing is you don't need to give up your characters and your worlds. As I've already said, we get deeply, deeply attached to our fictional characters, and we spend so much time creating these imaginary worlds. We don't want to give them up. And I don't think you have to, because that's not part of what makes it maladaptive daydreaming. That's immersive daydreaming. You don't need to stop completely. It's all about finding a balance. You have to get enough control over your daydreaming that you can bring it back into balance with real life. I think most people start out as immersive daydreamers. It's not maladaptive from day one, from when you're a small child. It becomes maladaptive when you start using it in a way that's not entirely healthy. And so you can always go back. So to me, what overcoming maladaptive daydreaming means is you turn it back into the immersive daydreaming that you used to have. The trouble with doing that, of course, is there's no clear boundary between what's healthy and what's unhealthy, that should say. You have to work out where that boundary is for you. It's different for everyone. I can't tell you how much time each day it's okay to spend daydreaming, because you have to figure out how your daydreaming is going to fit into your life. You have to work out which aspects of your daydreaming are actually a problem for you and something you need to address, and which bits are actually okay. So why don't we just stop completely? Because everything I've just said about trying to find where the boundary is, if you just did stop completely, that's a clear definition, right? The trouble is, I think that immersive daydreaming, if you have that ability to create stories in your head, that is your natural thinking style. I don't think it's really even realistic for us to just stop. I've had stories in my head literally for as long as I can remember. I don't really know how I would function in the world if that part of me wasn't there. And more importantly, because it is such a natural part of who you are, I don't think it's healthy to try and suppress that. It's like you're not being authentically you. You're trying to be somebody different. And I just don't think that's ever really a healthy thing to be trying to do. And also, there are benefits. Once you've got control over your maladaptive daydreaming and you've turned it back more into immersive daydreaming, you can really use that it's not just a neutral thing. You can learn to use it in a really positive way. My immersive daydreaming, it's how I solve problems. It's how I regulate my emotions. It's the source of my motivation and my inspiration. And so if you try to stop daydreaming completely, you're going to be missing out on all those benefits. So that's why I think the solution to overcoming maladaptive daydreaming is not to stop completely. It's to bring it back to the healthy immersive daydreaming that you probably started with. So now let's get into the actual sort of meat of it, as it were. The 4-step plan that I talk about in Extreme Imagination that has helped me to overcome maladaptive daydreaming, and which I really believe can help the majority of maladaptive daydreamers to get to a much healthier relationship with their daydreaming. So, step 1, I call it drop the shame. Every maladaptive daydreamer that I've ever spoken to just about struggles with shame. Most of us can't even talk about this in therapy. It's that embarrassing. I'm not entirely sure where the shame comes from. I think there's a lot of stigma around being a daydreamer. It's seen as being lazy and distracted. A lot of us will sometimes mumble the words or talk out loud, and there's a lot of stigma associated with that as well. Some of us get very embarrassed about what we're daydreaming about. We think it's a bit cringy, or maybe if you've based a character on a real person and your character's now acting in a way that you know the real person just wouldn't, maybe you feel uncomfortable about that. So there are all sorts of reasons why we struggle with shame. But the trouble is, shame isn't really a helpful emotion. Shame tells you that you're bad. That's what shame is. It's that sense that there is something wrong with you, that you're a bad person. And if you're going to make any change in your life, particularly anything around mental health, you have to do it from a place of compassion. You have to believe that you deserve to have a better life than the one you're living at the moment. And your shame is telling you you don't. There's a quote that I've seen floating around on social media in several different places, and I haven't been able to find out who said it first. It says, "You cannot shame yourself into change. You can only love yourself into evolution." And I think that's so true. As long as you're feeling shame urges you to hide. That, because shame is telling you you're a bad person, it's urging you to hide that badness, to not let anyone else see it, because you're going to be rejected if other people see what a bad person you are. And I brought that bullet point up a little bit too quickly there, but one of the things that I've learned in therapy over the years, one way of regulating negative emotions is something that in DBT therapy is called opposite action. And basically it means that you can move past a difficult emotion by acting in the opposite way to what the emotion is urging you to do. So in the case of shame is urging you to hide, to not let anyone see what a bad person you are. So the way to move past shame is to stop hiding and to connect with other people. And in the context of maladaptive daydreaming, I think the easiest and safest way to do that is to join some sort of online support group. I've already mentioned the maladaptive dreaming group on Reddit. There's also a huge community over on Discord. There are also several Facebook groups devoted to maladaptive daydreaming. If you have not joined any of those groups, please, as soon as you get off this, go, whatever social media platform you're most comfortable with, go and find a support group, go and join it. Start talking about your daydreaming in a safe space where you're with other maladaptive daydreamers, other people who get it, who are not going to judge you for this, but you have to start talking about the fact that you are struggling with this, because that is the way that you will move past the shame. Okay, so that's step 1, drop the shame. Step 2, resolve the underlying issue. Maladaptive daydreaming usually starts as an escape. Real life is not the way you want it to be. It might be that you're dealing with something that feels overwhelming or painful. Perhaps you've been through some sort of trauma. It can also be that the flip side of that, it can be that you have an emotional need that real life is not meeting. So, for example, if you feel that there is nobody in your life who really cares about you, then perhaps you've created an imaginary world full of people who love you and admire you and will always be there for you, because you're trying to meet a need that is not being met in real life. So whichever way around it is, there is something that pushed your daydreaming from the immersive daydreaming you started out with. It pushed you across into needing to daydream as some sort of an escape from something. Now, this underlying issue, it's going to be different for everyone. I do go through a few examples in the book of different things it might be and different ways of approaching it, but I can't give you an absolute method for dealing with the underlying issue, because everyone's different. If it is trauma, you might need to look at going to therapy. If it's that you feel very lonely, then maybe you've got to work on building your social network. But the point to make here is that your daydreaming isn't the enemy. Your daydreaming's not out to get you. Your daydreaming is the response to the fact that something in your life was not right. Either something in reality felt overwhelming, so you needed your daydreaming to provide you with a safe place that you could go to get away from something. Or if it's about a need that's not been met, then your daydreaming was trying to meet that need. And yes, it's got out of control. It's now causing problems. But in the beginning, your daydreaming was trying to protect you. It's not the enemy. So this one says, you need to resolve the underlying issue to stop feeding your daydreaming. It's that underlying issue, that's what's driving you into needing to daydream, because there's something going on that you can't cope with any other way. And when you resolve that underlying issue, you're not dependent on the daydreaming anymore. You're free to daydream because you want to, rather than because you need to. So that's step 2, resolve the underlying issue. Step 3 is you have to make real life worth coming back to. You almost certainly are not where you want to be in life. We've just covered the fact that your daydreaming has become maladaptive because you're escaping from something in reality that's not the way you want it to be. But also, if you've been living with maladaptive daydreaming for quite a long time, it's causing problems of its own. It's not unusual for people to spend in excess of 4 to 6 or even more hours a day, every day, daydreaming. That's time that you're not spending moving forward with your life. So over time, the longer you're living with maladaptive daydreaming, the more of a disconnect you get between the life that you want and the life you've actually got. You know, this might show up, for example, as if you're still in an entry-level job 10 years into your career because you never quite got round to studying for the qualification you need to get promoted. Or it can just be a more general sense of you see the people around you getting on with their lives. Perhaps they're advancing in their careers, they're meeting someone special, they're settling down, they're maybe buying a house, and you feel like you're just stuck and you're not moving forward. And that dissatisfaction, that fact that your life is not the way you want it to be, maybe not the way you always thought it was going to be, that in itself is going to give you that urge to daydream, because in your daydreams, you can have anything you want, just like that. You don't have to work for it, you just imagine it. And so the solution to real life being a bit of a mess is quite often to daydream. So when your real life is not the way that you want it, that in itself is pushing you into your daydreaming. Real life has to be able to compete with your daydreams. Now, I don't mean that literally. If you're like me and you have this complicated sci-fi universe going on, then clearly real life is never going to be that. But you can still find things that matter to you in real life. You know, if you've got a few really healthy, nurturing, fulfilling relationships in your life, if you've got a career that you really feel passionate about, those are the things that will help to anchor you back into real life. Now, this is just about legible. One of the things that I did a few years ago, about 4 years ago now. Before I became a writer, I was thinking about a career change, and I actually thought that I might go into life coaching, and I got about 3/4 of the way through a coaching qualification. And so in extreme imagination, I've used some of the principles from life coaching to help you work out which parts of your life you need to work on, and to then be able to set yourself meaningful goals that really will give you a sense of meaning and purpose in real life, and then how to break those goals down into small, actionable, manageable steps so that you can actually, over time, start making genuine progress on making your real life somewhere that you want to be. So that's step 3. So we've covered 3 steps here. We've got step 1, drop the shame. We've got step 2, fix the thing you're escaping from. We've got step 3, make real life worth coming back to. You've noticed so far I haven't really mentioned the daydreaming at all. But it's important to get those 3 things sorted out, not necessarily first, but at least be working on them alongside trying to manage your daydreaming, because those are the things that are pushing you into your daydreaming. They're the things that mean that you need your daydreaming. And so once you start to work on those, then getting your daydreaming back under control becomes a whole lot easier, because you haven't got that constant push telling you that you need it. So step 4, it's strategies to manage your daydreaming. And in the book, I go into there's a whole chapter that's kind of a pick and mix bag of all these different tips and tricks that can help you to get a bit more control over how much time you're spending daydreaming. I haven't got time to go through all of them in this presentation, so I'm just going to focus on the one that has been the most useful for me over the years. And it's also the one that has some real solid scientific evidence showing its effectiveness. And that one's mindfulness. And I can kind of sense that some of you are probably groaning a bit when I say mindfulness, because mindfulness is so hard for us. That this whole stereotype around mindfulness being sitting still, closing your eyes, focusing on your breathing. And for daydreamers, if you do that, you're cutting out all the external distractions, and some little voice in the back of your head's going to go, "Oh, daydreaming time." And it's just so difficult. But there are many ways to practice mindfulness. Now, the whole sitting still, focusing on your breath thing, it does work with enough practice. I've had a daily mindfulness practice for many years now, and it does get easier with practice. So please, if you've tried before and it didn't work, do give it another go. But if it really is impossibly difficult for you, there are many, many different ways to practice mindfulness. I love guided visualizations, because if I'm listening to a track that's telling me to imagine that I'm walking down a beach or through a forest or something, it's giving the imagination part of my brain something to do. I'm not just asking my imagination to shut up for a while I'm focusing on my breath. I'm actually inviting that imagination into the mindfulness practice with me, and I find that really helps. The other thing you can do, and this is a really great tip if you're very busy, is you can just practice what I call present moment awareness, which is when you just, whatever you're doing, you do it mindfully. So, to get more information on that, if you just Google something like mindful walking or mindful eating, there's lots and lots of resources online about how to do it. So, for example, mindful walking. Instead of, if you're out for a walk, you might just put your headphones on, put your music on loud, and that's daydreaming time. But if instead you just be very present in the moment with the sensations of walking, so you notice how your body feels as you're walking. You notice what's around you, what can you hear, how does the wind feel against your face. You're just trying to really be very in the present moment. The reason mindfulness works is that it teaches you to sit with discomfort. So one of the reasons that we get pushed into maladaptive daydreaming is that we get so used to using it as an escape. Every time something in life makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, we need to get away from that. We need to escape. We go off into the daydream. Mindfulness teaches you to just acknowledge that the discomfort is there without being consumed by it. So you might be being mindful and you might notice, you might think to yourself, yes, I'm feeling sadness in this moment. And then you could take it one step further and say, well, where do I feel that in my body? Perhaps I feel a heaviness in my chest. Perhaps I feel tired. But it's just about noticing, okay, the sadness is here, but you don't feel that you get consumed by it. You don't feel you need to escape from it. So mindfulness has been really, really helpful. It's probably been the single biggest thing that has helped me to get to a healthier relationship with my daydreaming. And as I say, it's also something that has been scientifically shown to help people overcome maladaptive daydreaming. But as I say, mindfulness is just one of a whole range of different strategies you can use. And in the book, I do go through all sorts of things. I talk about how to manage triggers, how to pull yourself out of a daydream if you found yourself daydreaming when it's not helpful to you, how to cope with daydreaming first thing in the morning. That's something a lot of people struggle with. So there's a whole range of things that I talk about in the book. And not all of those strategies will be helpful for everyone. As I said, it's a bit of a pick and mix thing. There'll be some strategies that don't really resonate with you, and there'll be others that you find really helpful. And you just choose the ones that work for you, and you come up with your own personalized plan for how you can get your daydreaming more under control. So that's my 4 steps. Step 1, you have to move past the shame. Step 2, you have to fix the thing that you're running away from. Step 3, you have to make real life worth coming back to. And then in step 4, you can start to manage your maladaptive daydreaming. So that's the sort of teaching bit of the presentation. If I have convinced you that I do know what I'm talking about, I mean, I do have probably about 48 years of lived experience of being a daydreamer. It hasn't been maladaptive for the whole of that time, but you know, I do know what I'm talking about. I have fixed my own maladaptive daydreaming. So if I've persuaded you that Extreme Imagination is a book that you might want to buy, this is now the obligatory sales pitch part. Best place to get hold of the book is on Amazon. If you're in the UK, it's $12.99. If you're over in the US, it's $14.95. That's for if you prefer an actual physical paperback version. If you do prefer to read your books electronically on Kindle, there is a Kindle version available. Obviously, that's a little bit cheaper. So you do have that option. If for whatever reason you don't like giving your money to Amazon, you can also order the book direct from my publisher. Extreme Imagination is published by Cherish Editions, which are part of Trigger Publishing. And so you can go to the Trigger Publishing website. I actually checked it earlier today and it's not quite up on there yet, but I'm sure in the next couple of days it will appear from there. And so that is another option for you. You can get it direct from the publisher website. And I'm just going to end up with a little plea here. If you do buy the book, when you've finished reading it, please go and leave a review, or at very least leave a rating on Amazon. It really does help the algorithm. As I said at the beginning, one of my reasons for writing Extreme Imagination is I want this to be an introduction to the topic when somebody has just found out that this thing they've been struggling with is called maladaptive daydreaming. I want them to be able to go and find this book. I also want it to reach people who don't know that that's the word for what they do. So one of the ways that we can all help to raise awareness here is the more reviews, the more ratings that Extreme Imagination gets on Amazon, the more the Amazon algorithm is going to push it out to more people. And maybe, just maybe, we reach somebody that needs this information and didn't know there was a word for it. So it's really, really important. Please, please, please leave me reviews. So thank you. That is, I'm just checking the time. We were very late starting because of the technical difficulties. So I think at this point, I'm just going to open it up to questions. Is anybody here wanting to ask me anything either about the book itself or about maladaptive daydreaming in general? I just see Catherine's put in the chat that she's just joined. So you didn't see it earlier, Catherine, but this is Extreme Imagination. This is the actual book. And yes, I have just about matched the colour of my slides to my book cover. Right. Does anyone have any questions? I'm just giving a quick shout out at this point to my husband, who is over on the other side of the house, acting as my chat monitor today. He's not noticed any questions, I don't think. I haven't seen any come up in the chat. If there are no questions, I think I'm just going to say a huge thank you to all of you for coming and for supporting me. Oh, right. No, we do have one question. We've got Catherine's asking how much of the book is advice versus memoir. It's mostly advice. I do weave in a little bit of my story throughout the book, just so that you've got a sense of who I am. And I did go out and talk to a number of other maladaptive daydreamers, and there's little bits of their stories woven through it as well. But I mainly bring in my experiences and other people's experiences as just little snippets to illustrate a point. Most of the book is basically advice. I did originally want the subtitle of the book to be a self-help guide to overcoming maladaptive daydreaming, and the publisher felt that was too long, and we dropped the self-help bit from it. But that's what it is intended as. It is intended as a self-help book, and it is mostly advice. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Right. Okay. So in that case, I think I am going to close this out, let you all get back to your day. Oh, yeah. Dimmer says, any chance of follow-up books? I am not done with writing. I made a decision 3 years ago, the story of that is in the book, to be a writer. And I have loved every minute of writing this book. It's been a huge project, a huge journey, and it's changed me in some really positive ways. I will be writing more books. They may not, in fact, they probably will not be on the topic of maladaptive daydreaming, because honestly, I think I've said it all in this one. I mean, maybe a few years down the line, I don't know, as more research comes out, maybe there might be something follow up, but I think for now, my writing's maybe going to go off in a slightly different direction. I have had a few people tell me I should write a novel. Watch this space, no promises. But I think for the moment, everything I have to say on the topic of immersive and maladaptive daydreaming has gone into this book. So no plans for a follow-up on the same topic at the moment. Anyone else want to ask anything? I think we really are just coming up to the hour now. So I think probably I will close this out here. I just want to say, oh, no. Okay, one more question. Okay, just got time for one more then. Do you think still daydream for the original reason we started, or other reasons now come along? I think that's going to be a very individual thing. Maybe it'll be a bit different for everyone. I think it's definitely possible that other reasons come along. I think sometimes the original reason, it can be something that maybe resolves itself over time. But by that point, you've got so used to maladaptive daydreaming being your coping mechanism, that it's going to be your go-to coping mechanism for everything that goes wrong in your life. So, you know, the original reason, maybe that does go away, but by this point, daydreaming has just become your go-to means of whenever you need to cope or to numb out. Oh, I think sometimes it can even just become a habit that you need to break. So I think, yeah, other reasons can definitely come along. Some people will still be struggling with the original reason, and if you are, I think you definitely need to address that. But maybe, yes, over time, other reasons come along as well. Right, we are now on the hour, so I am gonna say goodbye now. Just say thank you again. It has been so good to have you all joining me today for this live stream, and please do go out and buy the book, and please do leave me a review on Amazon. It really will help get the word out. So thank you, all of you, and I'm gonna close this out now.